it's David with No Chaser, and I hope you're all doing well. My beard is getting longer as it's getting hotter. This is not good. Anyways, so for today's topic, I want to talk about something that is not just about an addiction to alcohol or drugs or anything like that. You know, when I think about now when I feel triggered to use, or I feel a sort of not a pure craving, but like a sort of feeling coming on to drink, you know, it's not just me thinking about the intoxication, you know, the actual act of drinking and it going through my body and just the warm gut feeling or anything like that. I mean, that is a part of it, but usually there's something that actually like precedes that. And what happens, at least in my mind, is that there's this almost an addiction to a mindset that I want. And for me, and this may not be the case for a lot of people out there, so sorry if this doesn't resonate with you fully, but in my experience, for me, it is almost, like I said, an addiction to a mindset where it just feels so good to just escape and to give up or give in. Like, the way I feel that it goes is that it just, there's this attraction there to just the feeling of not caring. And the thing is that we can't just not care, you know, unless you're like a sociopath or a robot. You can't just turn that off unless you have drugs and alcohol. And that is such a superpower that like nothing else brings that upon you, where it can just flush away everything. And again, I don't just mean the good feelings, but the idea of just not caring, of just letting go. And you know, I wonder, this seems like a pretty bleak mindset to have. I mean, it doesn't seem real great. You know, there's obviously something wrong in my mind if I'm attracted to something like that, but it's not like all the time. I mean, what happens is it's almost like a reaction to the feeling of being overwhelmed or anxious or disappointed or discouraged about life, or just things aren't going the way that you wanted them to go. And it just, man, it would be nice just to be like, fuck it. I mean, that's even like a saying in the recovery sort of community, like a case of the fuck it's, where it's just, you know, and part of that also is just based on this sense of impulse. Like, you know, plenty of things I've had when I've been sober and just not anything to do with drinking, but there's this, I don't know, a knee-jerk reaction that comes out of nowhere where like one day I'm just like, you know what, I'm just gonna call into work. And it's like, why? I'm not sick. And this isn't like about me taking a mental health day. It's not like one of those things where it's like, I've been slogging through, I just need a day for me. It's just like, let's just call into work. Let's just fuck it. Just do whatever today. And there's not even a real plan. It's just that real punch of impulse. And the way it works through my mind of just this mindset is that, you know, it's the relief of responsibility, or just not even just responsibilities you have, but the burden of caring about things. The burden of having things mean something to you. So it calls for you to put forth effort, or it calls for your patience, or it calls for accountability and all this sort of stuff. And you know, I know it varies wildly, but depending on where you're at in your life, which, you know, your demographics, whether you have kids, how old they are, if you're alone, if you're young, if you're old, all that type of stuff. But you know, I think about it in this sense where there was this sort of saying of, it's gone around, I don't remember who it goes back to. It might just be one of those like ubiquitous sayings, but it's just that you can really tell your alcoholism when you're not drinking. What they kind of like, I believe, mean by that is that, you know, the excess of drinking is supposedly this symptom of this substance abuse disorder, alcoholism, addiction, that there's something that is within us that is and it's a driver to that. Now, I've always sort of believed that a lot of things can lead you to drinking and using drugs in excess, but you know, at a certain point, it almost doesn't matter what got you there once it's hijacked your brain. If you have a brain that's susceptible to that, and then it's hijacked your brain, it almost doesn't matter if like trauma or, you know, mental health or just some circumstances in your life brought you to it. Now, I'm not saying those things don't matter. Of course, you know, a history of trauma or, you know, co-occurring mental disorder can exacerbate it plenty of times. And it can make it harder to quit or harder to stay clean and sober. But I always just kind of thought that it would hijack your brain, and then it's kind of the allergy or whatever you want to call it that is released in your mind, that you just can't drink or you can't use any sort of chemicals. They're just like, it's not for you, because you have no, it's just once you do it, you go, and you have no control over yourself once it's like in you. And I think about that, and the thing is that idea of the alcoholism taking over when you're not drinking, which sounds strange, but you know, it would be one thing if I like had the hooks of addiction synced into me, and then I detoxed and went to treatment, and I got all clean and clear minded, and I was reflecting on my life and all this sort of stuff, and that could be seen as a sort of phase in my life where it's just like I got sucked into something. And it's like I got really into Dungeons and Dragons, or really into like the game, or like CrossFit or something. But it's not quite like that. I mean, it's not quite. It's not at all like that, because the thing is that it's not about getting sucked in. It's the way that I keep getting sucked in, and that's really the part. It's like what goes on in the mind that calls you back to that. Because the thing is that obviously there's things like post-acute withdrawal symptoms, and those things in your mind that have like been disrupted, the lowering of dopamine that can occur, the way you kind of mess with the natural chemicals in your brain that can bring you back to wanting to use. But at a certain point, once you've like made it through a lot of the rough spot, what calls you back to it? And I think that's where I go with my theory of just being addicted to a mindset. Or sometimes people say being addicted to a way of life. Some people say they're addicted to chaos, or they're just, they just like a wild life that is unpredictable. Or, I mean, it's unpredictable, I guess, but it's a miserable sort of life. But there's just, this sense of, why would a person, once they've been separated for it, why would they go back to it? And in my experience, it's just that there is something where, and this doesn't last in my head all the time. In fact, it's very short periods of time, but the obsession is huge, and the compulsion to do it is very intense, mixed in with like physical sort of cravings and things like that. But just that, like I said, the attraction to go to a mindset where you don't have to care about things, you don't have to feel things, or you can shirk your responsibilities, or you can just, if you're just dissatisfied with life, you can rebel against it. You can just say, you know what, I ain't doing this shit anymore. And that doesn't have to last very long. It's just once you've made a sort of, even a tacit agreement to it, that's where it doesn't, like when I say I don't think about the drinking, the actual act of it, or buying the alcohol, or sitting at the bar, or doing anything. What occurs before it is just the idea of, I don't even want to go back to the drinking life, but I want to go back to that life where just I was just like, floating out, and I didn't have a care in the world, except I totally did. My life was just a fucking train wreck. But that sort of fantasy of just being like, you know what, I don't care anymore. Sort of this like big, gravitational pull towards this nihilism. And everybody thinks they're a nihilist until they actually have to like be in the total mindset of nihilism for everything. And I was like one of those people where I just, again, this idea of just being attracted to a mindset where, that's what I felt pulled me back in, and pulls so many other people back in, is that it's not even sometimes just wanting to go back to drinking or using drugs, but it's just wanting to go back to a life that isn't the one you have now. Maybe because it's boring, maybe because it's difficult, maybe because things aren't going the way you want to, or there's other external circumstances that are terrible, or maybe all of those combined, or some combination of them. And even though logically that life that includes drugs and alcohol is destructive and terrible, and the consequences get worse and worse and worse, there's something that blocks your mind about those things, and you're just like, I want to go back to the old ways. I want to go back to just not giving a fuck. Which isn't stupid, because you always give a fuck. Once you go through it, and then you just sober, clean up just a little bit, just even in some time of reflection, you're like, oh God, I ruined everything. You totally give a fuck, but you gotta trick yourself into thinking you don't for a moment. I don't know. That was all sorts of rambling, whatever, but that was just kind of a thought I had about, and the phrase in my mind, an addiction to a mindset. Anyways, hope you got something out of this video. I hope you got something out of my videos. I appreciate any of you guys for watching, just being curious, interested, just, I don't know, looking at some different sort of insights or ramblings from me, and I appreciate you all. If you're struggling, my heart goes out to you. Definitely sympathies. If you're doing well, if you're staying the course, keep at it, and just for anybody else, be well.